My name is Anna Whitmore, and I learned the true meaning of silence on a Sunday afternoon surrounded by pastel decorations and people who used to respect me. It was supposed to be a joyful day. I had spent 3 full days preparing my house for the baby shower. Every ribbon, every flower arrangement, every carefully folded napkin had been placed with intention. The living room looked like something out of a magazine. Soft mint balloons, ivory tablecloths, and a handmade banner above the fireplace that read, "Welcome, little star." I remember standing there before the guests arrived, smoothing out invisible wrinkles, thinking how proud my late husband would have been. Then the guests came. Laughter filled the rooms. Teacups clinked, compliments were exchanged, and for a while, everything felt right. I moved through the crowd like I always did, gracious, attentive, invisible in the way a hostess is supposed to be, until my daughter-in-law raised her glass. "Before we open gifts," Claire said, her voice light and polished, "I just want to say how excited I am about this new chapter." Everyone turned toward her. My son, Michael, stood beside her, one hand resting proudly on her shoulder. Claire smiled, and then she said it. "Well, once Anna moves into assisted living, we'll finally have space for the nursery." For a moment, no one reacted. Not because it was funny, because it wasn't. The air didn't just go quiet, it froze. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Someone coughed. A fork clattered onto a plate somewhere behind me. I didn't move. I couldn't. It felt like I had been gently but deliberately erased in front of an audience. And then, Michael laughed. A short, awkward laugh, like he wasn't sure whether he should. "She's kidding," he added quickly, though his tone lacked conviction. But the damage was already done. I felt every pair of eyes shift toward me, waiting, watching, measuring how I would respond. Pity flickered across familiar faces. Discomfort across others. I forced a smile. "Well," I said calmly, lifting my teacup, "I suppose everyone likes to plan ahead." My voice sounded steady. Inside, something cracked. The rest of the party passed in fragments. I remember cutting the cake, smiling when someone complimented the frosting, thanking guests for coming, hugging people goodbye. But it all felt distant, like I was watching someone else perform my role. My friend Eleanor squeezed my hand as she left. "You didn't deserve that," she whispered. I nodded, but said nothing, because if I spoke, I might have shattered completely. After everyone left, the house felt too large, too quiet. Claire had already retreated upstairs, claiming she was exhausted. Michael hovered near the kitchen doorway, hands shoved awkwardly into his pockets. "Mom, you know she didn't mean it like that." I didn't look at him. "Take the trash out, please." He hesitated, then grabbed the bag. Avoidance. That was his solution. It always had been. Later that night, I sat alone in my bedroom, the same room Claire had casually reassigned in her future plans. I stared at my reflection. 65 years old. Silver hair tied loosely at the back of my neck. Fine lines framing my eyes. A face that had lived, loved, endured, and apparently become inconvenient. Was that all I was now? An obstacle? A temporary occupant? I opened the drawer beside my bed. Inside were the things I hadn't had the heart to move since my husband passed. His watch. His reading glasses. A letter he had written me years ago. "Anna," it read, "you're stronger than you think, but you let people forget that." I exhaled slowly. He had always said that I gave too much, that I made myself smaller so others could feel comfortable. And maybe he had been right. The next morning, something inside me had changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, but definitively. I noticed things I had ignored before. Claire's behavior shifted depending on whether Michael was home. Her sweetness felt rehearsed. Her tone sharpened the moment he left. Her phone was always in her hand. Messages she hid.
calls she stepped outside to take.
At first, I told myself it was none of my business. But then I remembered her words. When Anna moves into assisted living. Not if.
When?
That wasn't a joke. That was a plan. A few days later, something small but telling happened. A letter arrived. It was addressed to Claire, from a firm I didn't recognize. I had barely glanced at it before she appeared behind me and snatched it from my hands. "Oh, thanks," she said quickly, too quickly. She didn't meet my eyes. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. Over the following weeks, I watched more carefully, and the inconsistencies began to pile up. She claimed she had prenatal appointments, but dressed like she was going somewhere else entirely. She mentioned meeting friends who, when I casually asked later, hadn't seen her at all. One afternoon, I overheard her speaking on the phone. "I told you, he doesn't suspect anything." When she saw me, she ended the call immediately. That night, I sat in the dark living room long after they'd gone to bed. I didn't want to believe it. I truly didn't. But something was wrong. And whatever it was, it involved more than just me. It involved my son. I wasn't a paranoid woman. I had spent 40 years teaching literature, guiding teenagers through truth and deception, motives and consequences. I knew how to read between the lines. And Claire was full of them. I went upstairs quietly,
Paused outside their bedroom.
then stepped inside. I told myself I was just looking, just confirming. Nothing more. Her nightstand drawer opened easily. Inside were ordinary things, lotions, vitamins, and a small notebook. I flipped it open. Names. Numbers. Repeated entries. And one name circled more than once. Ethan Cole. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at that name written on a scrap of paper I had copied it onto. My heart was beating faster than it had in years. Not from fear. From clarity. Something was happening. Something deliberate. And for the first time since that baby shower, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind refused to rest. Every small detail from the past few months replayed itself with new meaning, like a story I had misunderstood the first time around. The late-night calls. The sudden errands. The way Claire's voice would change when Michael entered the room, softening instantly into something warm and convincing. I had dismissed it all before. I had wanted to dismiss it. But now that I had seen that name, Ethan Cole, something inside me had sharpened. This wasn't imagination. This was pattern. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual and stayed in my room longer than I needed to. I listened. The house had its own rhythm, and over the years I had learned it well. Michael moved quickly in the mornings, cupboard doors opening, coffee machine humming, footsteps steady and predictable. Claire, on the other hand, took her time. But that morning I noticed something different. Her footsteps were lighter, faster. There was a quiet urgency in the way she moved, like someone trying not to be heard. By the time I stepped into the kitchen, Michael was already leaving, adjusting his tie, distracted as always. "See you tonight, Mom," he said, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek. Claire stood beside him, smiling that perfect, polished smile. "Take care," she added sweetly. And then the door closed. The silence that followed felt different. Claire didn't look at me right away. She walked to the counter, picked up her phone, checked something, and only then spoke. "I have an appointment today," she said casually. "Don't wait for lunch." I nodded, pouring tea as if nothing mattered. "Doctor?" I asked. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second.
Yes.
Routine. I didn't respond, but I watched. She left 10 minutes later, and just like that I made a decision. I grabbed my coat, waited another 5 minutes, and followed her. It wasn't something I had ever imagined myself doing. At 65, trailing my pregnant daughter-in-law through the city felt absurd. But there I was, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, keeping just enough distance so she wouldn't notice. She drove across town, not toward the clinic I had accompanied her to before, but in the opposite direction. My stomach tightened. She parked near a row of office buildings and stepped out, adjusting her coat, checking her surroundings before walking inside. I stayed in the car for a moment. Then I followed. The lobby directory was clear. No medical offices. Just legal firms, financial advisors, and on the third floor, Henderson and Cole, family law. My breath caught.
Cole.
The same name. I didn't go upstairs right away. Instead, I stood there pretending to check my phone, letting the information settle. A law office. Not a doctor. Not even close. Whatever Claire was doing, it wasn't routine, and it wasn't innocent. After a few minutes, I approached the receptionist. "Excuse me," I said calmly. "I'm looking for Claire Whitmore." The woman typed something into her computer. "She's currently in a meeting," she said. "You can wait if you'd like."
I smiled politely.
"No, that's all right. I just needed to confirm." I thanked her and stepped away, but I didn't leave. Instead, I went upstairs. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. I walked slowly, my footsteps careful, until I found the office. The door was partially frosted, but shadows moved behind it. Two figures seated across from each other. One of them unmistakably Claire. And then, the elevator dinged behind me. I turned and froze, because the man stepping out of it was someone I recognized instantly, even though I had never met him in person.
Tall.
Confident. Familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. Ethan Cole. He didn't see me. He walked straight past and entered the same office. My hands went cold. This wasn't coincidence. This was connection. And whatever they were planning, it involved him. That evening, I said nothing. I watched them instead. Claire sat at the table, smiling, talking about baby names, nursery colors, paint samples. Michael listened, completely absorbed, completely unaware. I studied his face, the softness in his eyes, the quiet excitement, and felt something twist painfully inside me. He had no idea, not even a hint. And Claire, she played her role flawlessly. If I hadn't seen what I had seen, I might have believed her too. "Anna, what do you think?" she asked suddenly. I looked up. She was holding two color swatches. "Which one feels more peaceful?" I forced a small smile. "Whichever one makes you happy." She smiled back, but her eyes lingered on me a second too long, as if she was wondering what I knew. That night, I couldn't sit still. I went to my computer. I hadn't used social media much in recent years, but I remembered enough. It didn't take long to find her profile. Perfect photos. Perfect captions. Perfect life. But perfection always leaves traces if you look closely enough. I clicked through her friends list, and there he was. Ethan Cole. I opened his page, and everything shifted. Photos. Dozens of them. Claire and Ethan together. Not recent, but not distant either. Vacations. Dinners. Smiles that looked far too intimate to be casual. The most recent one was less than a year old. Before her engagement to Michael. Or perhaps during. My chest tightened. I scrolled further. More evidence. More overlap. More lies. The next morning, I called Michael. Not to tell him everything. Not yet. "Do you remember someone named Ethan Cole?" I asked casually. There was a pause. "Claire's ex," he said. "Why?" I stared out the window. Just curious. "Well, it's over," he added quickly. "That was before me."
Before you.
I didn't correct him. But I knew better now. That afternoon, I sat alone in the living room, the weight of everything pressing down on me. A lawyer. An ex-lover. Secret meetings. Lies layered on top of lies. This wasn't just betrayal. This was strategy. And suddenly, her words at the baby shower made perfect sense. She wasn't joking. She was preparing, positioning, planning a future where I didn't exist, and where Michael was nothing more than a piece in something much bigger. I looked at my husband's photograph on the mantel. "What would you do?" I whispered. The answer came quietly, not in words, but in certainty. I couldn't confront her yet. Not without proof. Not without something undeniable. Because if I was going to shatter my son's world, I had to be absolutely sure. And so I made a choice. I would wait. I would watch. And when the time came, I would be ready. Waiting is a strange kind of torture. It doesn't scream. It doesn't explode. It settles into your bones and sits there, quiet and heavy, forcing you to live your life while knowing something is terribly wrong beneath the surface. That's what those next few weeks became for me. A performance. A routine. A carefully controlled silence. I moved through the house like I always had, cooking, cleaning, asking polite questions, smiling at the right moments, but inside, I was counting, observing, collecting. Every glance Claire avoided. Every message she hid. Every time Michael defended her, without even realizing he was doing it. The worst part wasn't Claire. It was my son. Michael had always been a good man. Not perfect, no one is, but kind, steady, loyal to a fault. After his father died, he became my anchor, without even knowing it. We had built a quiet life together, one rooted in mutual respect and understanding. And now, I watched him slipping into something fragile, something false, and I couldn't shake the feeling that if I acted too soon, I might be the one who broke him completely. That's why I didn't confront Claire.
Not yet.
Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Carter and Wells Investigations, a calm voice answered. "Is Laura Wells still working there?" I asked. There was a pause.
She is.
"May I ask who's calling?" "Tell her it's Anna Whitmore." Another pause, shorter this time. "Hold, please." A minute later, her voice came through, older but unmistakably sharp. "Anna, I didn't expect to hear from you again." "I didn't expect to call," I replied. "But I need your help." We met 2 days later in a quiet cafe across town. Laura hadn't changed much, still observant, still composed, still the kind of woman who noticed things most people missed. I told her everything. The baby shower. The comment. The lawyer.
Ethan.
The photos. The lies. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I finished, she leaned back slightly and studied me. "And you're sure you want to know the truth?" I didn't hesitate. "I already do. I just need to prove it." She nodded once. "Then we'll find it." The following days felt longer than they should have. Knowing someone else was watching, gathering, confirming, it should have brought relief. Instead, it made everything sharper, more real. I found myself noticing even smaller details. Claire's tone when she spoke to Michael. The way she checked her phone first thing in the morning. The subtle irritation in her voice when I entered a room unexpectedly. It was as if I had been given new eyes, and now I couldn't unsee anything. A week passed. Then another. Laura didn't call. I told myself that was normal. That real evidence takes time. But patience has limits. When my phone finally rang, I knew before I answered. "Anna," Laura said, her tone different now, heavier. "We need to talk in person." That was enough. We met in the same cafe. This time, she brought an envelope. She didn't slide it across the table right away. Instead, she looked at me, really looked. "What I'm about to show you," she said carefully, "will change things. You need to be certain you're ready." "I am," I said. I wasn't, but I needed to be. She pushed the envelope toward me. My hands didn't shake as much as I expected when I opened it. Inside were photographs.
Clear.
Undeniable. Recent. Claire and Ethan. Together. Not just talking. Not just meeting. Touching. holding hands, entering a hotel, leaving the same office, building I had followed her to, dates stamped, times recorded,
Proof. Cold. Precise.
unarguable. I felt something inside me go still. Not shock, not even anger, just confirmation. I'm sorry, Laura said quietly. There's more, I replied, my voice distant even to myself. She nodded. There is. She pulled out another set of documents. Financial records, she explained. Your son's accounts. Transfers made over the past several months. I stared at the numbers. Large sums, moved carefully, quietly, repeatedly, to a separate account under Claire's name, Laura added. One Michael doesn't have access to. My chest tightened. She's preparing, I murmured. Yes, Laura said. And that's not all. She hesitated for the first time, then reached into her bag and pulled out one final document. A draft agreement, she said. I took it slowly. My eyes scanned the page. Legal language, structured clauses, and then names. Claire Whitmore, Ethan Cole, and a line that made everything inside me drop. Relinquishment of parental rights in exchange for financial compensation. I stopped breathing for a second. This, I whispered. Laura nodded. It's a paternity arrangement. The world didn't spin. It didn't shatter. It just shifted. Everything aligned into one clear, brutal picture. The baby wasn't Michael's. It never had been. Claire had planned this from the beginning. Use Michael for stability. Use his money. Use his home. And keep Ethan in the background. Control everything. Win everything. I folded the papers carefully. Too carefully. As if neatness could somehow contain what I had just learned. What are you going to do? Laura asked. I looked at her, then down at the envelope, then back at her again. I'm going to wait. She frowned slightly. For what? For certainty, I said. Not suspicion. Not evidence like this. Something final. The baby, she said. Yes. She studied me for a long moment. You understand what that means, don't you? Once you confirm it, there's no going back. I know. And I did. Because this wasn't just about exposing Claire. This was about destroying the life my son believed he had. The drive home felt longer than usual. I kept seeing Michael's face in my mind. His smile. His excitement. The way he talked about becoming a father. And I knew, every second I waited, he was falling deeper into something that wasn't real. But acting too soon? That could make him choose her.
Doubt me.
Turn away. I couldn't risk that. Not without absolute proof. When I walked into the house, I heard voices upstairs. Claire and Michael, talking about the nursery again. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening. If we move things around, Claire was saying, we could make more space. Your mom's room would be perfect. There it was. Again. Not subtle. Not accidental.
Planned.
Michael's voice was quieter. I don't think that's a good idea right now. Not right now, she replied smoothly. But eventually. Eventually. I closed my eyes for a second, then turned away. That night, I sat alone in my room, the envelope resting on my lap. I opened it again, looked at the photos, the documents, the signatures, every piece of it, and then I placed it back inside. Carefully, deliberately, because this wasn't over. Not yet. I stood up and walked to the mirror. The woman staring back at me didn't look broken. She didn't look afraid. She looked focused, stronger than she had been in a long time. Claire thought she was in control. She thought she had planned everything perfectly, but she had made one mistake. She underestimated me. I turned off the light, and in the darkness, one thought remained, clear and unshakable. I would wait. I would watch. And when the moment came, I would end it. Time moved differently after that. Slower, heavier. as if every day was deliberately stretching itself just to test my patience. I lived in the same house, sat at the same table, heard the same voices, but everything had changed. I wasn't part of their life anymore. I was watching it,
Studying it.
waiting for the exact moment when truth would no longer be avoidable. Claire grew more confident as the weeks passed. That was the irony. The closer she got to the end of her plan, the less careful she became. She moved through the house like it already belonged to her. She spoke about the future as if it had already been decided. And Michael, he followed along not blindly but willingly, because love has a way of filling in the gaps logic should question. The baby arrived earlier than expected. It happened on a gray morning, quiet and unremarkable in every other way. Michael's voice shook when he called me. Mom, it's time. We're at St. Mary's. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the hospital bag Claire had prepared and drove there with a calm I didn't feel. Inside, everything was bright, clinical, and filled with movement. Nurses passing quickly, doors opening and closing, voices low but urgent. Michael was pacing when I found him, his hands running through his hair, his face pale but glowing with something fragile and hopeful. She's in there, he said, pointing toward the delivery room. They say it won't be long. I nodded, placing a hand on his arm. I didn't trust myself to say anything more. Hours passed. Then,
A cry. Sharp. New. Alive.
Michael broke before I did. Tears came instantly, without hesitation, as if his entire body had been waiting for that exact sound. I'm a dad, he whispered, almost in disbelief. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt something break inside me too. Not doubt, not confusion, just grief. Because what he believed in that second was real to him. And I knew I was about to take that away. When they finally let us in, Claire lay in the hospital bed, exhausted but glowing, the baby wrapped carefully beside her. She looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen before, and for a split second, I wondered if she believed her own version of this story. If she had convinced herself that what she had done wasn't betrayal, but necessity. He's perfect, she said quietly. Michael stood beside her, holding the baby like something sacred. We named him Daniel, he added, after Dad. That was the moment the weight became unbearable. My husband's name, given to a lie. I stepped closer, looking down at the child. He was small, peaceful, unaware of anything beyond warmth and touch. And yet, even then, there was something in his features that didn't belong to us.
I didn't say it.
I didn't react. I just nodded. He's beautiful, I said. And that was true. None of this was his fault. Later, when Michael stepped out to make calls, I stayed behind. The room was quiet except for the soft sounds of the machines and the baby's breathing. Claire closed her eyes, pretending to rest. But I knew she wasn't asleep. I could feel it, the awareness, the tension beneath her stillness. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, my eyes drifted to the small medical tray nearby. The nurse had just taken a routine blood sample from the baby. A piece of gauze, lightly stained, sat discarded to the side. Something in me moved without hesitation.
Calm. Precise.
I reached over, picked it up, and slipped it into my bag. That was it. The point of no return. The next part required care. I couldn't rush it. I couldn't afford mistakes. That night, I called Laura. I have what we need, I said. There was a pause. And Michael, she asked. I'll handle that. The following morning, I returned home before anyone else. I went straight to Michael's room, still the same one he had grown up in, and stood there for a moment, letting memory pass through me. Then I walked to the dresser, picked up his hairbrush, and carefully removed several strands caught in the bristles. It felt wrong, invasive, but necessary. Everything about this situation was wrong. I packaged both samples exactly as instructed.
Sealed.
labeled, sent. 3 days. That's how long the results would take. 3 days to live in a world that was already broken. I just hadn't told anyone yet. When they brought the baby home, the house changed instantly. Softer voices, slower movements. Everything centered around him. Claire played her role perfectly. Attentive mother, gentle partner, grateful daughter-in-law. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have believed she had changed. But I watched her closely, and I saw it, the flickers, the distance in her eyes when she thought no one was looking, the way she checked her phone constantly. And once, just once, I saw the name appear again. Ethan. She turned the screen away quickly, but I had already seen it. The email came in the evening. Simple, clinical, final. I opened it alone in my room. Read it once, then again, and again. There was no ambiguity, no room for interpretation. Michael Whitmore was not the biological father of the child. Probability of paternity, 0%. I didn't cry.
I didn't react.
I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling something settle inside me. This was it. This was the truth. And now it was my responsibility to reveal it. I didn't sleep that night. I thought about every possible outcome, every reaction, every word I could say. There was no version of this that didn't end in pain. But silence was no longer an option. By morning, my decision was made. They came home just before noon. Michael carried the baby inside, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. Claire followed behind him, calm, composed, already in control again. "We're home," she said softly, as if claiming it. I stood in the living room, waiting, watching. "Mom," Michael said, "come sit with us." I didn't move right away. Instead, I reached into my pocket, felt the paper, folded, ready. "Michael," I said quietly, "we need to talk." He looked up. Something in my voice made him pause. "Can it wait?" he asked. "We just got." "No," I said. And this time, he listened. I stepped forward slowly. Claire's eyes were already on me. Sharp, alert, suspicious. She knew. Not everything, but enough. "I'm going to say something," I continued, "and I need you to listen before you react." Michael frowned slightly, shifting the baby in his arms. "What is it?" I looked at him, really looked, and then I said it. "The baby isn't yours." Silence. Not the kind from the baby shower. This was heavier, denser, like the air itself had stopped moving. Claire laughed first.
Short.
Sharp. "Are you serious?" she said. This again. But her voice wasn't steady. Michael didn't laugh. He just stared at me. "Mom, what are you saying?" I took out the paper, held it between us. "I'm saying I have proof." And in that moment, everything changed. There's a moment, right after something irreversible is said, when the world doesn't react immediately. It just pauses, like everything needs a second to catch up to what just happened. That's exactly what it felt like standing there in the living room, holding that folded sheet of paper while my son stared at me as if I had just spoken a foreign language. Claire didn't move either. But unlike Michael, she wasn't confused. She was calculating. "Give me that," Michael said finally, his voice low, almost strained. I stepped closer and handed him the results. He didn't open them right away. For a second I hoped he might refuse. That denial would win. That he would choose not to know. But then he unfolded the paper.
And read.
I watched his face change, not all at once, but in layers. First confusion, then resistance, then something deeper, something quieter and far more dangerous. Realization. His grip tightened around the paper, and for a moment I thought it might tear in his hands. This doesn't make sense," he said, though his voice had already lost conviction. Claire stepped forward quickly. "Of course it doesn't make sense," she snapped. Because it's not true. She went behind our backs, did God knows what, and now she's trying to tear this family apart. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Michael. There's more, I said calmly. That got his attention. Slowly, I placed the envelope on the table. The one Laura had given me. The one I had opened and closed more times than I could count. Look at everything, I said. Not just one piece. Claire moved faster this time, reaching for the envelope. No, we're not doing this, she said sharply. But Michael stopped her. Let me see. 2 words, but they changed everything. He opened the envelope. One photo, then another, then another, each one stripping away another layer of illusion. Claire with Ethan, outside the law office, at the hotel, holding hands.
Dates. Times.
Evidence that didn't argue, it stated. Michael didn't speak while he looked. That silence was worse than anything else. Claire's breathing became uneven. I could hear it from where I stood. These are old, she said quickly. They don't mean anything. You don't know what you're looking at. But Michael wasn't listening to her anymore. He was reading the document now. The agreement. The one with Ethan's name. The one that made everything undeniable. Claire, he said quietly. Not angry. Not loud. Just empty. Tell me this isn't real. That was the moment everything could have gone differently. If she had told the truth then, fully, honestly, without excuses, maybe something could have been salvaged. But Claire didn't know how to lose. Fine, she said, her voice shifting, hardening. You want the truth? Yes. The baby is Ethan's. But that doesn't change anything. Michael looked up slowly. It changes everything. No, it doesn't, she insisted, stepping closer. You wanted a family. I gave you one. Biology doesn't matter. You're still his father in every way that counts. I felt my chest tighten, not because of her words, but because of how easily she said them, as if love, trust, and truth were interchangeable pieces she could rearrange whenever it suited her. Michael shook his head slightly, like he was trying to wake himself up. You lied to me, he said. From the beginning. It wasn't a lie, it was a solution, she replied. Ethan wasn't ready to be a father. You were. Everyone wins. Everyone, he repeated. His voice broke on that word. And that's when I saw it. Not anger. Not yet. Pain. Real, deep, irreversible pain. He looked down at the baby, at Daniel, and for a second, everything softened. Because none of this was that child's fault. Then he looked back at Claire, and whatever softness had been there disappeared. You planned this, he said quietly. She didn't deny it. That was her second mistake. You're overreacting, she said instead. We can still fix this. You don't have to throw everything away because of something like this. Something like this. I closed my eyes briefly. The audacity of it. Michael stepped back. Just one step. But it created a distance that couldn't be undone. I want you out, he said. Claire blinked. What? You heard me. You can't be serious, she said, her voice rising now. Where am I supposed to go? With a newborn? To Ethan, he replied. Since this was all part of your plan anyway. Her expression changed again. Not fear. Not regret. Anger. Sharp and cold. You'll regret this, she said. Both of you will. Michael didn't respond. He just stood there. Still. Finished. She moved quickly after that. Gathering things. Packing without care. The performance was gone now. No softness. No pretending. Just calculation and resentment. At the door, she turned back one last time. This isn't over, she said. Michael's voice was steady. It is. And then she left. The silence that followed was different. Not empty. Not frozen. Just real. For the first time in months, Michael stood there, staring at the door long after it had closed. I didn't rush to him. Didn't speak right away. Some moments don't need words. They need space.
Time. Air.
Finally, he exhaled slowly and sat down, his hands covering his face. I didn't see it, he said quietly. I know, I replied. I should have, he added. No, I said. You trusted her. That's not a failure. He didn't respond, but I saw his shoulders shift slightly, as if something inside him had loosened. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Truth doesn't fix things. It just clears the illusion so you can start dealing with reality. There were legal matters, financial damage, conversations neither of us wanted to have, but had to. Claire tried to fight, of course, but the evidence was too strong. The outcome inevitable. And slowly something else began to happen. We rebuilt, not the same as before, but stronger, more honest. 6 months later, the house felt different again. Not empty, not heavy, just ours. Michael stood in what used to be the nursery Claire had planned, rolling paint onto the walls with steady, careful strokes. What do you think? He asked. I looked around the room. Warm colors.
Light. Possibility.
It's perfect, I said. He smiled. A real one. Not forced. Not distracted. Just real. You know, he said after a moment, I almost lost everything. I stepped closer. But you didn't, I replied. He nodded. Because of you. I shook my head.
No.
Because of the truth. That evening, we sat outside like we used to.
Quiet.
Comfortable. The sky slowly darkening above us. I'm not rushing into anything again, he said. Good, I answered. And if anyone ever jokes about sending you away, he added, glancing at me with a small smile. I raised an eyebrow. I'll show them the door myself. I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because it felt right. Life doesn't go back to what it was. It becomes something else. Sometimes better, sometimes stronger, and sometimes more honest than it has ever been. I was never meant to disappear. I was never meant to be replaced. And in the end, I wasn't.